There is a travesty here happening that has regional and global significance. The climate crisis is not a distant threat, it is here, we can see and experience it, and trees are our best chance at mitigating that impact. They are the lungs of the city. They absorb pollutants and put out fresh air. They break up the heat islands, reduce summer temperatures, they soak up water and mitigate flooding. They support all of the diversity of insects and birds and plants that we have here. And this is national parkland. This is Rock Creek Park is the largest forested area in DC. It is known as one of the largest and most pristine urban forests in the world. And yet we see that forested character being compromised for a golf course.
And we can be sad when we see this. I'm devastated. When I saw them cutting, I cried. These trees are sacred. We have a deep emotional connection to the land, and they are severing that, not just in the way that they teach us to live, but in what they do to the land.
The role that invasives play in forest ecology, they are a problem because they smother and crowd out the native species. The reason to remove invasives is to protect the native species, but if you're going to go in and remove all the natives and all the invasives and clear cut it, there's no environmental justification for that. If you're interested in preserving a native forest, you remove the invasives and you leave the natives. That seems like common sense. But they're trying to use it as a pretext. And then you talk about dead trees that are hazardous. Dead trees are a very important part of forest ecology. They support all kinds of animals that live in and get nutrients and habitat from those dead trees. It's not hazardous to anybody if it's in the middle of the woods. It only becomes hazardous when you clear cut everything around it and put up a building or a golf green next to that tree, then it's hazardous. And so there's this sort of backward logic, which because of what we're planning to do, we have no choice but to do what we're planning to do.
So this is an example of what we're talking about. These are maple trees, and this stuff is porcelain berry. And then clinging to the trunk is English ivy. Those are both invasives that are harmful to the tree. But if you look up, you can see the vines don't reach to the top. Right. The upper part of the canopy is still free of vines, and that means the tree is not in any imminent danger of dying. It can probably survive at least another 10 years, and it can survive another 100 years if somebody spends 5 or 10 minutes cutting these vines out. This is the invasive porcelain berry.
Oh, okay.
And it's called that because
it does look very much like porcelain.
China.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility to speak out when we see things like that, and they can't hide it from us. They put up the barriers, but we still see with our own eyes what's been done.
Yeah, these are, you can tell some of them are dead, but this 1, 2, 3, 4, there's at least 4 native tulip trees laying right here. So the ones closest to us, you can see where the cut is very yellow. That's how you tell that it's alive, and you can tell from the bark pattern that it's tulip poplar.
Because DC has always been a federal enclave, we lack sort of local control over a lot of things. The federal government controls almost all of our parkland, about 90%, including Rock Creek. And so sort of municipal recreational facilities that would normally be under a local Parks and Rec department are actually part of the national park system. And you'd think that would afford more prestige or more funding or a higher level of environmental protection. But it turns out to be just the opposite. We are at the mercy of Congress to fund our parks. They have grossly underfunded the National Park Service. The Park Service is not particularly good at managing urban parks. And so we see neglect, trash accumulates, invasive species take over wooded areas, and then the golf course falls into disrepair. And then that neglect, that's a result of austerity and lack of public investment, is used to justify privatization. So a group, National Links Trust, comes along and says, hey, we're going to raise $35 million in private money and we're going to spend it to rehabilitate the golf course. And the Park Service feels like they can't say no to that, because they in their view, the alternative is to leave it and just leave it the way it is, and they don't have any money to spend on it. Frankly, that would be better. They would be leaving. Sometimes benign neglect is better than this sort of malicious intervention that happens when you turn public land over to private use. people are still playing on this golf course, and I've talked to people who actually like it the way it is, because it is not manicured, because you, at times when you're playing the course, you feel like you are in the woods. There are others who feel like it does need some rehabilitation and some attention, but there are many ways that you can do that. Members of the Golf Course for All Coalition have come up with alternative plans that would restore the playability of those holes, while cutting down far fewer trees than what are currently slated, saving all of the heritage trees, those with circumference over 100 inches, which if this were private land or city-owned land, it would be illegal to cut those down. So again, the irony that on federal parkland, the federal government is able to basically break its own rules, give a blank check to this private entity, National Links Trust, and then kind of go through the motions of doing community engagement and environmental impact assessments. But really the fix was in the moment they signed the lease, because the lease committed the Park Service to allowing, basically handing full control over the National Links Trust, allowing them to renovate as they saw fit. So if the Park Service had after that said, tried to raise objections to the plans brought in by NLT and say, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, National Links Trust would have sued them and said, you're violating the terms of the lease. In the lease you said we could do X, Y, and Z. And so they made, in the legal term, irretrievable commitments to NLT prior to doing any environmental impact study, prior to doing any community engagement. And everything else that they did afterwards was just window dressing, because the key decisions had already been made. And that's unacceptable. So this is a fight for public land, against privatization of public land, against the austerity and the neglect of public land that sets the table for privatization and destruction of that public land. And it's a fight for globally and in our city trying to mitigate the worst effects of climate change. What I found out was that there are, in that particular area, I'm told it's one of 4 cutting areas. We saw one near the entrance. And I saw a second one over here, and at that one there's about 10 trees that have been cut down. It appears that 6 of them were dead before being cut, but the other 4 were living native tulip poplars.
How,
Yeah.
Were they native? Were they?
Yes,
100%?
they were native. They were definitely alive before they were cut, and I didn't get to measure them, but I think all 4 were what would be considered special trees under DC law.
Oh, wow.
So circumference of more than 45 inches. I don't think any of them were 100 inches, which would make it a heritage tree. But it does prove that they are not being truthful when they say that what they've cut down so far is only invasives and only dead trees. The lease that the Park Service gave to National Links Trust includes not just this golf course, but 2 others in DC. Once the work is done here, they're going to be looking to renovate those, and so that's going to be round 2 and round 3 of this battle to make sure that golf is not being used as a pretext for further deforestation. So this is part of a much larger struggle to stop deforestation, which we can't do that just by planting new trees. We do need to plant new trees, but they're going to take 100 years or more to reach the size and stature and of the trees that are being cut down. It's going to be 100 years before they can clean the air as much or soak up as much water, provide as much shade and canopy as the ones that are being lost. So we need to stop cutting them down, and we need to invest in removing invasive species in order to protect the native species that are around them, not as a pretext to destroy the whole thing.
And they tried to talk to us, they tried to stop our rally, but they can't hide the truth. It stands right in front of us, or really it lays right in front of us, because it doesn't stand anymore, it's been taken down. Shame. And it is devastating. Like, when I see this, I feel loss, I feel grief. But we have to believe and hope that another world is possible, and that we can make a change happen, not just in Rock Creek Park, but across the world. We as environmentalists, we as community members, we as people of conscience, and we as people with a relationship to the land can make a change. And so I want to say, together we're unstoppable! A better world is possible!